Okay, we are in Yaakov. Please subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much. Okay, we are on, like I said, Shabbos 33b1, and we come to the part where it says, in your book it says, the people of the yeshiva, right? How to say it? The scholars of the yeshiva asked. That's where we are. Okay, so it says, who they asked, and what they're asking is a halakhic question. So Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yossi, when Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, said that askarah, that this plague comes from slanderous speech, it was al lashon hara kama. Was he saying it only comes on account of slanderous speech, or dilma af al lashon hara nami kama, or perhaps he was saying it comes even on account of slanderous speech. So what is the reason we get askarah? And he explains it comes as either a punishment, it comes as a punishment for either slander or the transgression of Ma'aser laws. So what's going on? Or just because of lashon hara. Okay. So Tashma, come and learn. Proof from the bright. It says, "Kishenichnasu rabotenu the kerem v'yavne." When our sages of Israel left Yerushalayim and entered the vineyard of Yavne, and this is an important historical note that we're hearing. It's interesting how the Gemara just assumes that we know what the kerem v'yavne is, but what happens is it says this explains just before the destruction of the temple, Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai led the greatest sages of the generation to the town of Yavne and proceeded to reestablish the Sanhedrin there. The academy there was referred to as the vineyard of Yavne because the scholars sat in ordered rows, much like the rows of vines. And he says this contrasted with the traditional semicircle arrangement in which the Sanhedrin sat, as described in the Mishnah Sanhedrin. The reason Sanhedrin did not sit in a traditional manner at Yavne may have been to allay the suspicion of the Roman authorities that they were in fact a Sanhedrin. As pointed out by the Dorothy Rishonim, in the aftermath of the destruction of Yerushalayim and the temple, the Romans were hostile to any institution of Jewish authority, and they would certainly not have allowed the sages to reestablish a Sanhedrin. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai gained permission to bring the sages to Yavne only because he made it seem that they merely wished to establish a yeshiva there. The Romans had no inkling that this would become a Sanhedrin. To preserve this camouflage, the sages decided to sit in rows as they would in a lecture hall rather than a formal semicircle fashion of an official court. So that's what we're calling kerem Yavne. It's a fascinating story how Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai realized that the temple was going to be destroyed, realized Jerusalem was going to be lost, and was brought out in the Gemara says, was brought out in a coffin. That's how they got his body out from Jerusalem, out of the which was fortified at that point. They had to bury him, and the law is you have to bury them quickly, so he has to bring the body out. And a lot of miracles went with that too. To get him out, finally he comes out and he sees Vespasian. He says, "Hail to the emperor." Vespasian says, "You should be killed on 2 counts."
What?
You should be killed on 2 counts. One is on treason. I'm not the emperor. I'm not the emperor. The emperor is in Rome. And if I were the emperor, you should come out sooner. So on 2 counts, you should be killed. Okay. So, but then a miracle happens again. He's not killed. And he says, what happened is, that's what happened. So a couple minutes later, somebody comes and says to Vespasian, "You are the new emperor. The old one was killed." And he says, so obviously we have an important personage here. And he says to Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, "So what do you want? Since obviously you speak to God or whatever, you have some sort of prophecy here, what would you like?" So he says to him, he could have asked for anything. And what he does is he could have said, "Keep the temple around. Don't destroy Yerushalayim." He could have said anything. What he says is, "Give me Yavne. Give me Yavne to relocate the yeshiva." Okay. So Vespasian apparently doesn't think twice about that, doesn't understand what's going on. and allows it. Thus they get to that. It's a very interesting story. The rabbis all ask, why didn't he ask for Yerushalayim?
Staves probably was not thinking about it because he just became emperor.
What?
He probably wasn't thinking about it because he just became emperor.
Whatever the reason is, it's a miracle that they didn't realize that the rabbis run the system and that the courts were good. So either it could have been just like every other ignoramus out there, or people who are just not ignoramuses. I guess they're ignorant as to how we operate, because they look to our kings instead of who really is the power base here. The real power base were the rabbis in that point, not the king. And that always was the way, because we respected the knowledge more than the office. And there's many stories like that. But nonetheless, when he gives him, like I said, so they ask, why did he pick on Yerushalayim? So some people say he made a mistake. And he regretted that. Other people say that he understood that Yerushalayim was gone because the people weren't fit for it anymore. So he said, let's move out of there. Let's move to a place where we can preserve the Torah, because the Torah doesn't have to stay in Yerushalayim. Never the temple would be destroyed as a result of that. But it was something that he had made a decision on. Again, right or wrong, it worked out for us in the end, I guess, because we're still here talking about it. So nonetheless, that's what they were. They were the vineyard of Yavne. Good. Kerem Yavne. There's still yeshivas, by the way, if you go to Yerushalayim. I think there's still a yeshiva, kerem Yavne.
Wow.
Yeah, named after this. But
where is Yavne geographically? Do we know?
Yeah, we do know, but I don't.
Today?
Yeah, I think it does. Like I said to somebody else recently, I am lucky I know where Mishawaka is. So to know where Yavne is, you'd have to look at a map. But yes, the answer would be, this would be in Roman times. So Yavne, or whatever that geographical spot would be called today, is probably very well known. Okay. So it says, Hayasham Rabbi Yehuda, and so among the sages there was Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Eli, Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, and Nish'ala She'ela V'zu B'fneim. Once the following question was posed in their presence: Makazu, this ailment, this askarah, mipnei matchelet b'fnei me'ayim v'gomeret b'peh. Why does it start out in the innards of the person and conclude by afflicting the mouth? He said, and he explains the most deadly symptoms of askarah occur in the mouth and throat area, where in its later stages, disease causes a strangling effect. When the Gemara states that the infection begins in the intestinal tract, it refers to the digestive difficulties that later result in the deadly results outlined here. They have today, the only reason I know is because I went to a shiva house, but they have something called an esophageal stretch. In the throat. When the throat gets constricted, they can do an operation that will stretch that so it will be easier to breathe. Okay? And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because it sounds like what they're talking about. The throat becomes constricted. And that...
Trachea or the esophagus?
Esophagus.
Esophagus is for food.
Yeah.
So the trachea then. Must be the trachea.
So you're talking about breathing.
Breathing, yeah. So it was breathing, so it must be the trachea. So it's something they can stretch it so that it makes it easier to breathe. So I'm not sure. It could, by the way, I'm going by what they're saying here. I'm not sure which one it would be, because also if the esophagus gets constricted, it could back up onto two, I'm guessing.
Oh, you're saying they maybe compress against the breathing.
Yeah, it could do a lot. I mean, that's why when people have stomach problems, they think it's a heart attack.
Yeah, well, you're right. Some people who have what I have called a hiatal hernia,
Right.
that causes me to swallow like this.
Uh-huh.
You see somebody swallowing like this, that's a hiatal hernia. Nothing else does that.
Right.
But the problem is, a heart attack, you see these symptoms, and people could think that you're having a heart attack when nothing
Right.
has nothing to do with the heart.
But also when people have indigestion, and it starts off with the stomach, then it works its way back up for some reason, and it goes to your chest region, and it can be very painful. And that's when people also go in for, as you get older. Young people just assume that there's nothing and go on with life, but when you get older, you see your friends getting heart attacks, suddenly you start thinking heart attack. And I remember when I was in Bangor, that a woman went in for a heart attack symptoms, and it was only something that was going on in her digestive system.
They call it acid reflux.
Something like that, could be that.
Similar to that?
Right, and so what happened was, but they told her, because she was quite up there, they told her, you always come back, just come back.
Yeah.
Because you never know, could be the other thing too, but it causes the same symptoms.
He says here that askarah, diphtheria, croup. I don't know, I've heard of diphtheria, but I don't know what the symptoms are.
You'd have to look everything up. I'm not sure what the different symptoms are.
Croup is an older word, I think.
Right, but what they're describing is something happens in the mouth and the throat. And it starts off in the intestinal tract. So again, it's digestive difficulties. So I'm saying it could be the esophagus, it could be a couple of different things that are going on there. But apparently that's how it starts. Okay, fine. So now, next thing is the Braita records various responses by different Tanaim. The first Tana that develops is the answer by analyzing how human speech is formed. It says, Nan Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Eli Rosha Medabrim Mechol Makom V'Yamar. So Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Eli, who was by governmental decree the first of the speakers in every place, and he explains that various occasions call for different orders of precedence among the speakers who are present. At festive celebrations, it was customary to ask the eldest person to speak first. At other times, the most scholarly individual will be accorded this privilege. Rabbi Yehuda, son of Rabbi Eli, though, was the first of the speakers in every place by the decree of the Roman authorities. He was always given to be the honor of speaking first. The historical reason will be told pretty soon. Fine. So he said, even though the kidneys advise, v'leiv maven, the heart discerns, and tongue articulates the words, pe gomer. Still, the mouth concludes the process of speech. Thus is the mouth that bears the final punishment for slanderous speech. Okay? So it says in Torah, or in Scripture, the kidneys and the heart are depicted as the seat of understanding within the body. Based on this, the present Tana asserts that askarah strikes first deep within the body, for it is in the internal organs, the heart and the kidneys, that thoughts of speaking slander originate. In its final stages, askarah afflicts the throat and the mouth, for in these parts of the body that process of speech and reaches that the process of speech reaches completion. In other words, we have what the Gemara really is trying to tell us is we have a couple of different systems in line here that can stop. In other words, it can stop what's about to happen. President Kennedy, I'm not sure which one. We had two Kennedys, right? Robert and...
only one president, though.
Only one president? Fine. So the president, which one was it? JF? JFK. So
You're from Massachusetts?
There's so many Kennedys running, so many judges. I wasn't alive when he was president.
You don't have to be.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
I knew that Benjamin Harrison was from Indiana.
We knew Eddie Kennedy.
Eddie?
Eddie.
What the hell's an Eddie?
Edward Kennedy was.
Ted.
Ted.
Yeah.
Ted. Yeah. It was really Edward.
Yeah. That's right.
Why is not the brain credited with starting this process that otherwise started down here?
Because
you can stop anything here before it gets out of here.
So you're right.
Or ought to be able to.
So you're right, but let me just finish what I was going to say first, and I'll get to that question. So the way Kennedy said it was, count up to 10 when you're angry before you say it. If you're still angry, count to 10 again. Okay? In other words, don't speak in anger.
You have heard of Tip O'Neill?
Yes, I have.
Oh, thank God. Yeah.
I've heard of all these guys. It doesn't mean that I know when they were alive.
And John Adams?
It's the president. Also the guy who drinks beer.
No, that's Samuel Adams.
Oh, Samuel Adams, there you
You were
go.
close, though.
The Adams family, there you go. He was, what was he, the 30th president, right?
Who cares? Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Well, he wasn't from Boston.
Who?
Adams.
John Adams? Yeah, he was.
He was from Boston too?
Yes.
Oh, wow. We had a lot of presidents.
I think Massachusetts has had 6 presidents,
Really?
or something like
From
one
the
state.
early
maybe
colonial
over.
days, early days.
Wow.
You have to watch the movie or the play 1776.
Wow. Well, no, that was Washington. That was Washington.
It's the first one, yeah.
Right. That was.
He was 1789.
Yeah, but he wasn't from Massachusetts.
He was from Virginia.
Right. I'm surprised we had so many. Wow. It's like the World Series. Okay. So now we won the World Series, right? Okay. There you go. Yeah, we're champions again. Okay. Okay. And
You didn't know that Carl Yastrzemski came from Notre Dame.
no, I did not actually. No.
Yeah, he played baseball here before he played it in Boston.
Where was he born?
I don't know where he was born, but he played
I did not.
baseball here.
I didn't know that. No, I did not know that. I also know who Knute Rockne was. I thought he was just. I just see a street named after him. Okay. Nonetheless, so what happens to answer your question in the is they get it from Torah. There's all these references to the heart and to the kidneys and so on and so forth. They're all based upon biblical verses that the Torah seemed to say, or again, the Tanakh in general, seems to say that each, like he explains, the kidneys and the heart are depicted as the seat of understanding within the body. So it does, we today would say everything comes from the brain. The brain is the operating system, the DOS of the body. Everything else is just that we look at our heart as a pump, merely a pump. We don't look at our heart as anything else in today's science. Okay, we look at our kidney as the filter and so on and so forth. Or the liver is a filter. I forget what the kidney does. I forget what the kidney is also a type of filter, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, the blood goes to,
It's also a type of filter. Yeah. So we see everything in that manner. And I'm not going to argue whether or not that's a true description. But in the Torah certainly, the heart was seen as the seat of emotion, I believe, and so on and so forth. So we're going to use those sort of things. By the way, just because science has seemed to indicate the other, and Torah was the one thing, and science being different, they're not necessarily contradictory. We don't know everything about the heart. We don't know anything about every part of the body. So it could be that the heart is something that has emotion, which is why you get heartache, blah, blah, blah. All these things that are not logical. So somebody died. Okay, somebody died. Next,
And they
go on with life.
If you can discern the differences, some of these things, depending where they are, might actually feel different. Heartache, which you call, might feel different than gas.
Correct.
It doesn't feel quite the same.
And it happens when you're sad. Right. So
Any of these things.
So that's what I'm saying. So what happens is, I don't want to dismiss the Gemara by saying they're wrong because science is right. I don't want to say science is wrong because I'm not want to do that either.
Our body of knowledge is also a work in progress.
Correct. So I think that there could be probably truth on both sides. And but that's really what it is. But the point of the Gemara is we have a lot of systems in place to stop us from doing certain things. And while it may start out in our heart or mind or whatever else, before it gets to our mouth, we've had time to digest it, if you will. Okay, and to decide if we really want to do this or not. And the problem is some people have what we call no filters, and they just speak whatever they want. Really, by the way, I don't believe that. I believe everybody has filters. I believe everybody knows how to use their filters, and I believe that some people do decide not to because they want to see they're more shock jock type people than they want to admit. That's all. I think they want the attention. This is my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Reaction they're going to get.
Right. I think that's really what it is. So they decide, I won't have a filter, but really they do have a filter, and when they need the filter, suddenly they find the filter. Okay. So I've noticed that too.
Yep.
But like I said, but you hear that many times. Oh, he speaks without a filter. He has a filter, but he just decides not to use it. Okay. And so Nana Rabbi Elazar ber Rabbi Yossi Amar. So Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, said again, this is Kerem Avna. B'bnei she'ochlim ba'davam tameim. The mouth is afflicted because through it people eat non-kosher things. Now, why would they pick on? Okay, well, he's going to come into this, but let's cover right away. What happens when you eat non-kosher things? Again, Jewish philosophically wise, what would happen if I eat a non-kosher thing?
Degrade your soul.
What?
Degrade your soul.
Degrade my soul. It desensitizes me, and so on and so forth. So once I desensitize myself, I'm starting off doing that. Now I can go. Now I can go lower and lower and lower. So that is why they're picking on non-kosher things. And the Gemara says, Tavar and Tameim Salkadacha, would it really enter your mind that eating non-kosher things would lead to a punishment as harsh as askarah? Certainly not. She says there's no scriptural source that associates death with eating non-kosher food. There is, however, precedent for the notion that consuming untithed produce and speaking slander warrant death as a punishment. So what the Gemara is quickly saying is, don't worry, you're not going to die if you eat a non-kosher thing. It's not good. I'm not saying what's good. We're agreeing that it's a prohibition against the Torah. But guess what? When you have that McDonald's hamburger or whatever you're going for, you're not going to die. But like I said, it will certainly desensitize you to certain things. And you have to understand that. It's going to distance you from God. No question about that. But it's not going to kill you. Good. So that's what the Gemara is saying. Ella, rather, what Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, must have meant is Shochlem b'devarim she'enam mitukanim. That through the mouth people eat things that are not properly tithed. And again, as mentioned above, consuming tevel, which is untithed produce, that is punishable by death. And that's God killing you, and that's what askarah is. God's killing you, right? It's not humans. By the way, this is very important to say. Just because a person sins doesn't mean that we have the right to kill that person, said person. The only time we do is if it is a punishable offense by the Torah and all of the requirements are met by the court, namely with proper warning and everything else, testimony and so on and so forth. That's the only time that we can impose the death sentence. And even when we do impose the death sentence and the person is killed within 24 hours, he doesn't get extended like we have in America, where you can be on death row for 20 years. That's just cruel. So we kill him right away.
And this is also, I think, should we point out that this is only during the times when the Sanhedrin was...
Right, it's only during the times of the Sanhedrin, and on top of that...
We can't do this now.
Correct. As the Gemara said, in Sanhedrin, any court that would kill twice in 7 years was considered a killer court, because there's so many ways to get a person out of that death penalty. But... nonetheless, the point is, it is on the books. I'm not going to argue that it's not, that it's on the books. But like I said, it's very hard to do it. What we normally rely upon is God taking care of that by either killing us one way or the other, or killing the person one way or the other, and that's it. Okay, so Nana Rav Shimon Amar. So Rav Shimon answered and said, Ba'avon bitul Torah. Askarah comes from the sin of neglecting Torah study. Thus, it afflicts the mouth which failed to articulate the words of Torah. So this is a scary one. So he explains that the Gemara above established a connection between the verse, in order to prolong your lives in the days of your children. To prolong your days in the days of your children, and the passage that appears 2 verses earlier. So teach them to your children and to discuss them. This passage implies that diligent study of Torah can prolong life, and conversely, the neglect of Torah can study them. So again, you can have this. You have a problem though, because why should the study of Torah kills somebody with askarah, a horrible death? And then furthermore, Rav Shimon assertion is challenged is Amrulo, the sage said to Rav Shimon, Nashim Yochichu. Women who are afflicted with askarah will prove you wrong. A woman can also get askarah. And what's the problem there? Women aren't obligated to study Torah. You're saying the punishment of askarah is for not studying Torah. Yet women get it. So you're wrong. Because women don't have that mitzvah. Yet we find, okay, so how do you deal with that? So Reb Shimon is not deterred here. He says, they might contract the ailment for causing their husbands to neglect their studies. Okay? That's your honeydew list. Okay, honey, before you go learn, do me a favor, get this and this and this. So that was what Reb Shimon responded. So they say, wait, we'll prove you wrong again. Nachrim yochicho. Also Gentiles get askarah, and they don't obligate to study Torah again. So he says, Israel, they could contract the illness for causing Jews to neglect Torah study. No problem. I'll kill everybody. I'm going to stick to my guns. You cause people to stop learning Torah. That's it.
Wow.
To say, okay, wait a second. Chinoko yochicho.
I don't know if they would get a diagnosis like this at the Mayo Clinic.
No, they wouldn't.
Probably.
Okay. So young children will prove you wrong because also they're too young to study. That's why they contract it. Okay, again. So Vatlin at Avian for causing their fathers to neglect their studies. I mean, how many times can you ask me the same question? I'm going to say the same answer. They're stopping the guy from learning Torah. Who cares? By the way, if you would ask, this is probably the harshest question, okay, out of the whole system, the children, okay, because here you're saying that the children got askarah because they were too young to study, but what they do, they stopped the parents from learning Torah. Fine, okay. Let's assume for 1 second that that's true. Let's assume for 1 second it's true, okay. To say that in today's system, today's society, or even back then, would have been the ultimate cruelty. What do you mean? My little baby got askarah because I didn't, what kind of cruel God is this? That's a necessary question that comes philosophically, that will come out of Rav Shimon's response. What are you talking about? That's insanity what you're saying. God gave us children, so we should take care of the children, not to neglect the children. So the fact that they get sick or something else, so it's going to make us lose more Torah. It doesn't make sense what you're saying. That really is a philosophical question that Reb Shimon would have to deal with sooner or later. Okay? So let's see what happens. He says, 13, 12. Okay, let's pick up a couple of these things so you know what's going on all together. Just make sure I didn't say anything. So he says, the Gemara Kedushin derives, how do we know women don't have to learn Torah? Because the Gemara Kedushin derives an exemption of women from study Torah from when it says, you shall teach them to your sons, implying, but you do not need to teach them to your daughters. Fine. Pesach Einayim raised the point that women are indeed obliged to learn all Torah laws that apply to them. Thus, perhaps they will contract askarah for the failure to study these laws. He suggests, though, that the Braita did not consider this possibility because women's obligation to study is a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. That is, women must study laws that apply to them because they must know what to do. They are not obligated, though, to study Torah for its own sake. As such, it does not seem appropriate that they would die for neglecting such study. So here you have a distinction, by the way, of studying Torah. Why do you study Torah? If you look at Pirkei Avot, it says the study is not the main thing. What is the main thing? Doing. You have to do it, right? So it would seem, according to that Mishnah, that the only reason I'm learning Torah is in order to know how to serve Hashem, and not just as intellectual pursuit. The Pesach Einayim is saying, no, there's two levels. One is I have to know what to do, but what happens when I come to a point, we have a lot of Talmud out there, a lot of laws out there that are not applicable today, okay, absolutely not applicable today, or they're not applicable to me at all. If I learn the laws like today, if I would learn the laws of kerem, first fruits, I'm not living in Israel. It's not applicable. Okay, so why am I learning that? Because it's Torah. So you have to know Torah. But it's not because I'm not going to do anything from it, then that's the second level of Torah study, where I'm learning it because it's Hashem's gift to me. So I have to learn it. But it's not because it's going to necessarily be applicable to my life. A woman, on the other hand, doesn't have that obligation whatsoever. She has to know what she has to do, so she has to learn. By the way, for the women, that means they have to learn Hilchos Shabbos, Hilchos Pesach, Hilchos Malicha, Hilchot Nida. It's a whole bunch of stuff they have to learn.
How to make the house, right?
Right. She has to learn all those things. She has to know them better than I know them. So that's a lot of learning for women who think they can't learn.
And a lot of doing.
A lot of doing, correct. But I'm saying that they have to learn it. So the point is that people who say there's nothing that women shouldn't be learning Torah, they're talking a different level of Torah. They're saying the back and forth argumentation. They're saying you don't need to know that, but you do need to know what to do. So they have to learn those things. Okay, that's the point. Then they said, how about the Gentiles? That was the next thing. And so he says the question arises as to how the other sages, those who explain askarah as a punishment for either slander or eating untithed produce, understand askarah among Gentiles. Gentiles are not commanded to observe these particular precepts, just as they are not commanded to study Torah. Thus, why would they be vulnerable to the disease? Ben Yehoiada suggests some answers to this difficulty. Slander often leads to bloodshed, and Gentiles are commanded not to kill. Thus, although Gentiles are not commanded regarding slander per se, they are still responsible for the results of this sin. He further suggests that if askarah comes from consumption of untithed produce, perhaps Gentiles would contract askarah for a similar sin, the consumption of stolen produce. Because of these possible answers, the Braita finds difficulty only with the position that the askarah is attributed to neglect of Torah study, a sin for which Gentiles seemingly have no connection. Okay. By the way, when it comes to stolen produce, it doesn't mean that they stole the produce. It could mean that they bought it from the fence. Okay.
Black market produce.
Black market produce.
Oh my.
It could be that. I remember when I was in New York, I was driving down the street in New York, and the guy opened the back of the truck selling steaks
Oh,
Yeah, we do that. Yeah.
for $5. He was ripping off the employer. There's no question about that. He was ripping off the employer, and people were taking it.
boy.
Give me $5, no problem. Give me $5.
Then people would realize, in other words.
They knew what they were doing, but they decided why should I pay retail? I can pay.
It's like the guy standing in line who visited my aunt in New York one time. We're going to the downtown movie theater, or midtown movie theater. Guy walking down the street with the long trench coat, he pulls it open, all the watches.
Yeah,
Watch, Rolex.
Right. That guy's just a cheat. He's not a thief.
Probably.
They're all made. They were on Rolexes.
Do you remember Rabbi Bergman?
From where? Here?
Here.
No.
He used to sell Israeli wine out of the trunk of his car.
There you go. Okay.
Downtown.
Okay. I don't know. Right. But like I said, you have these people, so they know that it's you know it's stolen, and the other one is. And by the way, this one you see, when you slander somebody, results of that can be somebody gets killed or you killed or whatever. That we see. That we actually see when, sadly, we see that today. That the bad talk has gotten many people beaten up throughout the times. So it's not a good thing to spread. And that's why they can be picked on. Okay, so now it comes to the last one. The question again rises, children not old enough to be culpable for slander or for eating untithed produce, just as they are not old enough to study Torah. So thus, askarah among children would seem to pose a difficulty for all the Tanaim, not just Rav Shimon. And then, so he says, okay, look for other place. There's problem. For some possible solutions, go to another place. Fine. And then Rav Shimon's response was, again, they interrupted the father. And so they called him to neglect Torah. So the fathers at times interrupt their studies to attend to the needs of their younger children or to appease them. Thus, although these children are obviously too young to be responsible for their behavior, they nevertheless can be a factor in causing neglect of Torah study, increasing their susceptibility to askarah. Again, a very hard thing to understand why Reb Shimon would say that. It really is because it causes so many more
Every answer he gives causes more questions.
Philosophical questions. More philosophical. So then he says, okay, wait a second. One more time, we're going to try this. So he says, Tinokot shall beit Rabban yochichu. But school children will prove Rav Shimon wrong, for they do study Torah, and yet they become afflicted. So once again, he explains the term Tinokot shall beit Rabban refers to children who are old enough to learn Torah and are indeed engaged in the study of Torah with their teachers. Such children who are older and more mature are less likely to distract their fathers from study. Thus, since these children study themselves and do not cause others to neglect their studies, there is no apparent reason for the susceptibility to askarah. So the Gemara replies on behalf of Rav Shimon, Hatam kederavi Gorian. There, in the case of school children, the reason they contract askarah is, as Rav Gorian explained, the Amar Rav Gorian, for Rav Gorian once said, V'itema Rav Yosef b'Rabbi Shemaya, and some say that Rav Yosef, the son of Shemaya, said, Bisman she'asadikim b'dor. In an era when there are righteous people in a given generation, tzadikim nidpasim al hador. These righteous people are ensnared for the sins of the generation. In other words, suffering befalls them, and through this, the generation as a whole achieves atonement. In tzadikim v'dor. But when, however, there are no righteous people in that particular generation, tinokot shall beit rabban nidpasim al hador. School children are ensnared for the sins of their generation. And he explains, so the Maharal explains the idea this way. The Jewish people is not merely a collection of disparate individuals. It is an integral unit, much like the human body, that although made up of many different organs and limbs, comprises an integrated and unified being. Carrying this analogy further, there are times when God causes certain parts of the body to suffer for the sins of the organism as a whole. When this occurs, the punishment is directed against the essential part of the organism, for in effect, that is a strike against the body as a whole. In the case of the Jewish people, this would mean that suffering is sometimes directed against the most righteous of individuals, and for these people are the community support and lifeblood. If in a certain generation there are no righteous people, then the essential part of the community is deemed to be school children, for it is through the merit of their innocent Torah study that the community draws its sustenance. Thus, in such cases, school children can be afflicted for the sins of the generation. That is, by the way, the concept is really from Kosher al Ravim Zeh B'Zeh, that we're all guarantors for the other. So when somebody does something wrong, we get punished. When somebody does something right, we get rewarded. Okay, we all benefit from the actions of the others. So here Rav Gorian is giving a looking at when people who are dying, who seemingly should not be dying, the tzaddikim or the people who are learning, the young people learning, they're pure, and why are they dying? She says because they're paying the debt on the society. And the truth is, you see this not in a physical death, but in a spiritual death. I just saw Rabbi Lindau sent an article to everybody on the list from some newspaper saying that with the intermarriage rate at 71% or assimilation rate at 71%, Judaism, the non-Orthodox groups are dying out at a very quick rate. Okay, why? Because they're not giving over the Judaism to other people, to their children, and those who are coming. I didn't understand the end of the headline there, but those who are coming back are doing so in a very meaningful manner. I didn't get to read the article yet, but it's based probably on the Pew study that was a couple of years ago. That what we're seeing is that the sins of the parents, if you will, are taking effect on the children. Because if I don't pass on the reason to be Jewish, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So, most people don't even care about. It used to be, in the 70s, people cared about Kaddish, Bar and Bat Mitzvah, wedding, and death. I hold this, right. All right, that's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And so that was it. Today, hardly anybody cares about bar bat mitzvah. Hardly anybody cares about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. The generation is not, the younger kids are not going for that. They'd rather go to the beach. They're not really interested. And certainly when it comes to marriage, they're marrying non-Jews. 29% into marriage. And I'm not sure why they're saying 71. I think it's much higher than that. But let's go with 71%. And with death, they're deciding to get cremated. Yeah. So Judaism, except amongst the Orthodox, is really taking a hit. The non-Orthodox groups are not preaching what Jewish philosophy holds. Either they're ashamed of it, they don't know it, I don't know what the reason is. But they're certainly not giving over to the kids. And that's, so you're seeing the death of a generation, a very fast death of a generation.
It makes you feel better, people don't gather around the piano and sing anymore either.
Doesn't make me feel better.
It doesn't?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather people gather around the piano and sing together. But you're right. All these things have gone away in the past. And again, except against that group, except for a small group where it hasn't. But that could be what you're seeing here. That the generation, that the righteous are, and God's saying, you people with the righteous, you should have given that over. You should have found some way to bring it over.
This is replacing the family unit.
It's replacing living.
That's what people
right,
do.
but also the kids, they become the korbanot, they become the sacrifices for the whole system. So again, you can take it as Gemara and they say it's a cruel Gemara, or you can take it and start looking in reality and saying this is what's happening. We're losing the very foundation of our people because of what we're doing. Maybe lack of Torah study, maybe lashon hara, whatever it's going to be. We're losing the foundation. And imagine this was happening back then. And now they were talking about askarah. I'm talking about a spiritual disease. They're talking about a physical disease, but nonetheless, that's the message can come across.
Can any of this be tied to a time frame?
The rabbis, sure. You're talking about Roman times, Roman later, a little, and after Roman times.
What was the state of medicine at that time? Why were there certain diseases that were in fact researched and cured instead of just everybody changing their behavior? Certain things are pathological, certain things are curable.
Again, everything ultimately is curable. You just don't know what the cure is, right? Even cancer is ultimately curable as long as you know what the cancer is, as long as you know what the disease is. So the rabbis, I said this many times, I'll say it one more because it's very important. For the rabbis, for Jewish philosophy, the sins are what cause the disease. Again, we have a spiritual malfunction that is manifest in a physical manner. That's all. So now if I can get to the root of the problem, not just a symptom, but the root of the problem, I may be able to solve the equation. Because today, I'll give you an example, cancer today. Okay, cancer. You'll tell me, a doctor will tell me, I'm not sure, doctors will tell me that it's a problem with the white blood cells are more than the red blood cells. But they won't be able to tell the person why there's been an increase. They'll tell, this is what happened. And you have 4 months to live, 6 months to live, a year to live, try chemo, try this, try that. And if you do chemo, you'll have a better chance to live. What do you mean, better chance? I want a guarantee. Give me the pill. There is no pill. There's no magic bullet here. And what they tell you is change your life, change this, change that, change your diet, get sugars out, get oils out, get meat out, get this out, get that out. Okay, so you move everything. You're living a macrobiotic life. There's no guarantee that that's going to solve the problem. As a matter of fact, I don't know if there's any research that says that would solve the problem. But let's assume there is for a second. Okay.
The problem you look at.
The point is that everybody wants to say, you change your nervousness, change this. So what the rabbis are doing is saying, the disease you have is a physical manifestation of your physical problem. A physical manifestation of your spiritual problem. Figure out your spiritual problem, and then you'll be able to solve your physical problem. Now, again, does that always work? Is it always a win? The answer is no. People are going to die. people are going to die. So what you're supposed to do is use that disease that you have to get closer to Hashem. And just accept what happens at that point. So, because nobody can solve every disease. Whatever we solve, something else comes up. You have age, you have this, you have that. We have so many diseases. Baruch Hashem, we have so many diseases.
We seem to have eliminated polio.
No, we didn't. It's still coming back. We have the immunization, but it doesn't always work. That's the problem. And you have other things that have chickenpox is coming back, and so on and so forth. Again, most of the reason is because they say, I don't know if it's true. Most reason they say is because people aren't immunizing themselves. Okay, so the disease comes back. Now, I don't know if that's true. Some people say the immunization is the problem.
Well, the cells mutate; they become a different disease.
Well, again, so once my point is that for everything that we cure, there's something else that comes up. There's always something else around. So it could be the cells are adapting and so on and so forth, the wonderful thing of the body. Okay, but I don't know. I mean, we like to believe we got rid of a lot of things. And if we get those medications, it seems that we have. But what happens to all the people who take their flu shots? Well, was it last year? Last year people took flu shots, and it was 20% effective last year. 20%. 20% effective. That means 80% of the people who took their flu shots put the flu into their system. Okay, a live virus, put it into their system, got the flu.
But it's also interesting, speaking of mutating, that when those solutions are prepared, they are prepared year by year. You can't take last year's flu shot this year.
Correct.
Because they're projected on what is expected.
Correct. And it's also why you can't cure AIDS. Because each time you do something with AIDS, they mutate. The point is that we're looking at the symptom. We're looking at the disease, but we're not looking at the reason for the disease. Let's look at the reason for the disease, and we can stop the disease. That's just a logical thing to say from science or anybody else. So the rabbis are saying disease is brought about, again, as physical manifestation of the spiritual malady, and science is saying, please leave me alone with spirituality. Let's just look at what's happening and try to figure that out. Well, with all due respect to the scientists, again, let's go before the disease and go back and see what caused the disease, what caused mutation. If you can do that, maybe you'll be able to solve the problem. But otherwise, you won't be able to. We'll have to stop here.